Have you ever thought about what happens when a system that's designed to be perfectly efficient smacks right into the messy, unpredictable reality of actual human beings? Well, that collision, that's exactly where our story starts. Today, we're going to dig into the incredible history of psychosociology, a field that was basically born to answer one huge question.
Okay, so let's get into it. Back in the early 20th century, you had factories that were supposed to be these temples of logic, right? Everything was measured, it was timed, it was optimized for peak output. So why did these supposedly perfect systems just keep hitting a wall? Why were there all these bottlenecks and conflicts and just general weirdness that pure logic couldn't seem to fix?
Well, it turns out the answer was both super simple and kind of revolutionary. The problem wasn't the blueprint, it was the whole assumption behind it. This idea of scientific management or Taylorism basically treated people like they were just cogs in a machine, interchangeable parts. It got so obsessed with the process that the actual worker, what they called the human factor, became totally invisible. And as you can imagine, when you ignore people, you get these complex, looping problems that no spreadsheet can ever solve.
Now, this slide here says it all. I mean, look at this contrast. On one side, you've got the organogram. That's the clean, neat, top-down chart of who reports to who. That's the official story. But then, on the other side, you've got the sociogram, that messy, tangled-up web of actual human relationships. Friendships, rivalries, hidden influence. That is the real story. And psychosociology made a really bold choice. It decided to pretty much ignore the neat fiction and dive headfirst into the messy truth.
So, if you're going to focus on the human side of things, on that messy web, you're going to need a whole new kind of science, one that doesn't really fit into the nice, clean boxes of psychology or sociology. It had to carve out its own space, its own identity, right there in the gap between everything else.
And to really get what psychosociology is, it's super helpful to look at what it's not. Take psychoanalysis, for example. It starts with the individual, right? Their inner world. And its big challenge was just proving its own ideas were legit. Psychosociology, on the other hand, starts with a small group. Its challenge wasn't inventing a new language, but figuring out where it ended and other fields began. And the big difference? It wasn't born in a therapist's office. It was born right on the factory floor, in the world of work.
And it also went down a totally different road than, say, experimental social psychology. See, an experimentalist looks at a group and sees a laboratory, a controlled place to test some big idea about human nature in general. But for a psychosociologist, the group is the thing you're studying. The goal isn't to prove some universal law, it's to understand the unique internal rules of this specific group in this specific situation, right here in the real world.
All right, so with its focus locked in, psychosociology got its first real mission, and it was a very practical one. The thinking was, hey, if the human factor is breaking the machine, then maybe the human group could be the tool we use to fix it. So how did this all play out? Well, it was really shaped by a couple of pioneers. Back in the 20s and 30s, you had Ilton Mayo's famous Hawthorne studies. They were just trying to see if better lighting made people work harder, but they accidentally stumbled on something huge. Just paying attention to workers, treating them like people, boosted productivity more than anything else. Then, in the 40s, Kurt Lewin starts to systematically study what he called group dynamics, looking at how we make decisions together. By the 1950s, the mission was totally clear. Let's use the power of the group to help people adapt to the modern workplace. And these books right here, these are basically the Bibles of that early way of thinking. The goal was never to question the system itself. No. It was just to make it run a little smoother by managing the people better. The group was seen as a way to build teamwork, smooth over conflicts, all of it to help the company's bottom line. Man, this quote from Eugene Enriquez just sums up that whole era perfectly. The entire focus was on one word: adaptation. Technology was changing, companies were changing, and the job of the psychosociologist was to help the worker keep up. It was basically an orthopedic approach, trying to fix the person to fit the system, not the other way around. But then, the 1960s happened, and suddenly, the world didn't feel like adapting anymore. It wanted to change. And this social earthquake just completely flipped the script for psychosociology. It turned that tool for fixing the machine into a catalyst for revolution. I mean, the chaos of the 60s brought this massive disillusionment with the way things were. The old ideas of just working and consuming started to feel really hollow for a lot of people. And that feeling, that shift in thinking, it didn't just stay out on the streets. It marched right into the heart of this new science and turned it completely upside down.
So this is the pivot. It's huge. Remember that first quote about just helping people adapt and fit in? Well, get ready for this one. The small group is no longer just for cooperation. It's a praxeological space, which is a fancy way of saying it's a hands-on workshop, a place to actually learn about and practice social and individual change. The goal wasn't to fit into the world anymore. It was to build a new one. And this massive shift meant they basically had to reinvent the whole field. First, they moved decisively out of the lab and into the messy reality of life. Second, they embraced this radical idea of action research, which says you can't just study a system from the outside. You learn about it by actively trying to change it. And third, they went from just measuring people to actually listening to them, taking on this more clinical, empathetic approach, where context is everything.
So this revolution, it didn't just change what the field did. It gave it a completely new way of seeing the world, and it left behind a powerful, unique legacy that still shapes how we think about social change today.
Out of all that fire and energy came 4 core principles. Number 1, action research. You create knowledge by doing something. 2, clinical work. You have to have 1 foot in the situation and 1 foot out. You have to be involved but also keep your distance. 3, a science of the singular. Every single group, every context is unique. There's no one-size-fits-all formula. And 4, a science of effects. Forget simple A causes B logic. The world is a complex spiderweb.
And that last point brings us to maybe the most mind-bending and honestly the most important idea to come out of all this: circular causality. This is the wild idea that in any human system, everything is both a cause and an effect at the exact same time. Think about it. A team's low morale might cause bad performance, sure, but then that bad performance makes the morale even worse, which causes even worse performance. It's a feedback loop, not a straight line. And that is why sometimes a tiny, tiny change, a butterfly effect, can set off these massive, unpredictable waves in a system. Now, you might think this revolutionary way of thinking would lead to one single unified field. But nope, it was more like a big bang. It acted as a catalyst that set off an explosion of different and often competing schools of thought. You had everything from institutional analysis looking at power, to socio-psychoanalysis, blending Marx and Freud, to systems thinking, and even therapeutic approaches like Gestalt. They all grew out of the fertile, chaotic ground that psychosociology broke open. And so, this all leaves us with one last, really profound question that cuts right to the heart of this field's legacy. If every part of a system is both a cause and an effect, if everything is tangled up in this complex looping circle, then where on earth do you even start to make a change? Where's the lever you can pull in a world that has no straight lines?